Hi, Mark. Charles.
Good morning.
Morning, start of the new year.
Yeah, let's hope we're all successful this year. Scott, are we waiting for anybody else, or do you want to go ahead and get started?
It looks like we have most of the people that we're expecting. I think we can go ahead and get started.
Okay. Good morning. I'd like to call the Surface Transportation Committee meeting for Tuesday, January 5th to order. We'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the
United States of America
and
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, everyone. At this time, we'll let's take a roll call so everyone knows that who is present. I'm Tom Schmidt from the town of Sherville, and Jeff Hewitt's here also from the town of Sherville.
So we need to decide what order we're going in.
Dean Button, City of Hammond.
Hi, Dean.
Park Odell, Town of Chesterton.
Hi, Mark. Everyone else might be muted, maybe.
I have a list here. I see Scott Weber, Brian Blazak, Candace Eklund, Kevin Polite, Tricia Nugent, Dennis Cobb, Dean Button, Jeff Hewitt. Tom, what's Tom's last name? I'm sorry.
Schmidt.
Schmidt, thank you. Rita Cavan, Don Oliphant, Mark Odell, Charles Bradsky, Timothy Werner, Gerald Sweats, Nick Bellar, Eric Wolverton, Justin Mount, Peter Kimball, and I have John Kennedy. If there's anybody I haven't called, can you please state your name? Kevin Brightsky as well.
Craig Phillips.
One moment. Craig Phillips. Okay. Anybody else? That should be it.
Okay, thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. Next on the agenda, well, it's public comment on agenda items. Does anyone have any public comment that they want to make on the agenda items for today? I'm sure we'll have comments as we move through the agenda. Next item is the minutes of the December 1st, 2020 meeting. Those are attached to the memo that was sent out. I entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the December 1st meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Dean Button, second.
We have a motion by Mark. I have a second by Dean. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Is there any opposed to the minutes? Okay, make a note that minutes carried. Next item is the review of the new roadways and quality of place roadway expansion fiscal years of 2025, 2026, notice of funding availability, NOFA, and the project applications. Scott Weber, you want to proceed with this?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning once again to all of our attendees for this morning Surface Transportation Committee meeting. We are gathered here today primarily because we need to review the quality of place roadway expansion and new roadways applications that were referred to us by the Transportation Resources Oversight Committee in their December 16th meeting. They decided to move those project types from Tier 3 to Tier 2, which potentially allows an opportunity to further their status in the Notice of Funding Availability, or the NOFA, for fiscal years 25 and 26. So because of that, we're gathered here to try to narrow down our support for these 6 projects. You might technically say they're, well, the town of Sherville has 2 phases of essentially the same project, but basically there's 6 projects that we're going to be reviewing further for hopefully some kind of consensus that we can build toward deciding which projects to recommend moving further into the Notice of Funding Availability program to be taken before the Technical Planning Committee, the TPC, eventually. We thought that meeting would be in January, but we might end up having more of that discussion in February with the TPC. But in any case, the meeting today is to try to build consensus toward trying to narrow down, ideally to no more than, say a couple projects that we can choose that we think should be carried forward for further consideration, just to help narrow the scope. So you'll notice in your agenda packets on page 4, there are the 6 project types. There are 4 in the new roadways submissions and 2 in the roadway expansions project types. So shown on page 4 are basically the sponsor of the project, the proposal, the federal funding request, and then some scores. There's a self-score, the NERC staff score, and then finally the most important score is the STC score, this committee's score as of when it was last reviewed on the far right. So obviously, I leave it up to the committee to determine if we want to basically weight score as the utmost factor in deciding which projects to move forward, or there are potentially other considerations worthy of our discussion this morning that we could consider. So that is just some background information, and then the rest of the agenda packet contains printouts of the application pages for each of these projects. So I leave it up to the committee if we want to go line by line. If any of the applicants is willing to be okay with not considering their project for discussion, I mean, obviously we could entertain that. But barring that, we can go through and evaluate the projects. I guess again, have a discussion about if there are any opinions about which of these 6 to consider. Obviously, a few of them are legacy projects. I will just throw that out there. The town of Sherville's Kennedy Avenue phases 3 and 4 essentially carries forward legacy projects, and then the Porter County Willow Creek Road is also essentially a legacy project. So I guess with that, that's an introduction of these 6 projects. Do we want to, is there any discussion, Charles, or anybody that was at that T-Rock committee that would like to introduce now that I might have missed, or that you think we should introduce to start this meeting with?
I really don't have anything to comment right now, and we can, if we'd like it, we could just start off and go through the projects, and you did a brief overview. Maybe we do a deeper dive into each of the projects.
Okay, that sounds reasonable to me. So we can go in the order that they're presented in the agenda packet. So I can go ahead and share my screen then. Let me just get that going with. Okay, so I'm going to share. Can everybody see this is page 4 of the agenda packet. Sorry, it's rotated 90 degrees, but can you see the projects that we're talking about here? Okay.
Yes.
So we'll start with in the new roadways submissions. The City of Hobart applied for an 83rd Avenue extension. This is basically a project that they're requesting 4.7 million, a little bit more, and it's scored a 53. And the information on this project is then on pages 5 through 9 in the agenda packet. So these are the printout of each page of their application. So this project is the lowest scoring project on our roster. I will start off by saying it is also I believe it's the shortest project in length. But so we can talk about if there's any strong discussion that needs to be had about, or I'll offer anybody from the City of Hobart the opportunity to introduce this project again.
Yeah, Scott, this is Phil Graylick. I'm here. I'm just having problems logging into the Zoom, so I'm only on the phone. But I can give a brief intro to the project.
Sure.
Essentially, this project, the idea for this came out of the US 30 safety study that NERC did, and that study identified parallel relief roads to US 30 that need to be in place for safety of pedestrians as well as the motoring public, and to ultimately, we recognize that US 30 corridor, the traffic is getting so bad that it's starting to hurt the businesses. So for the economic life of the corridor, we need to build these parallel relief roads. They're in our thoroughfare plan. We've added it to that. We are partnering with Maryville because the plan extends them through, through Maryville and Hobart. And this is just the first little piece. Probably the most difficult piece because it is connecting the ring road around South Lake Mall to Colorado and 83rd Avenue. So this road would be added from the southeast corner of the mall's property, behind Target and Home Depot, and going through that developed area. There are some grade challenges there where we're going to need retaining walls to get the road through a hillside behind Home Depot specifically. And then across Colorado, there's a roundabout plan for Colorado in our thoroughfare plan. And then NIPSCO has agreed to allow us to use their right-of-way that they own from Colorado to 83rd and Harms Road, which I believe intersects the curve where Harms Road becomes 83rd Avenue or vice versa. So that would become a 3-leg roundabout there. And then 83rd Avenue proceeds east from there. So while this is a short segment, it's a difficult one, and it would it's at least a piece of that first difficult section to get that relief road on the south side of 30. The north side of 30 is a much larger endeavor. So we were hoping to get this in on the south side.
Okay, that's thank you for the introduction, Phil. That's helpful to hear from the city's perspective. I think talking with some of my colleagues beforehand, I think that one of the emphasis of this meeting that we were hoping for is kind of a cost-benefit analysis. We realized we didn't have enough of time or technical expertise prepared to go through a formal cost-benefit analysis for each of these projects. But I think a point of emphasis that we'd hoped for this meeting was to try to hear a discussion about what types of potential revenue sources or like what types of benefits could this project tap into. Obviously, we have information about the costs that were presented in the application. And so having a discussion about what types of businesses might be served, what types of other revenue generating activities that these projects could help catalyze, I think would be helpful too.
Sure. Okay, do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, do you have
touch on
any,
it?
yeah, what
Sure.
would be your standard talking points about the project if you were making a pitch to us? I
Well,
guess?
in the economic analysis there, you know, obviously it is to preserve the corridor. The traffic in that area is getting so bad that people are starting to avoid it. And we see these parallel relief roads as they're mitigating the cost of expanding US 30. You know, through that area, it is 6 lanes right now. It probably needs to have 1 or 2 more lanes in each direction to handle the traffic. A lot of the turn lanes will need to become double turn lanes into the mall, into the other businesses without these parallel relief roads. So we're going to see a large increase in land being taken from some of these businesses. We may lose businesses because of that. We've had several businesses, you know, AutoZone at the corner of Colorado and US 30, for example, that have told us if certain things happen and it impacts their drives because they're so close to a widened Colorado or a widened US 30, that their business won't survive. We also see these parallel relief roads as arterials, and they are going to open up a new corridor where businesses can be fronted on these relief roads. So the relief road will be far enough off of US 30 that we'll be able to have businesses facing US 30 that are there now, but also have a business behind them that faces 83rd or in the future 78th or 79th, whichever it turns out to be. So we see, you know, the long-term benefits of this as just tremendous as far as the growth of that area.
Okay, I think that's it's a very helpful discussion to have, I think. So thank you for that information, Philip. And I want to also mention that Charles and I did a little bit of quick analyses from a technical perspective about all these projects. So I can start with the analysis that Charles did, and let me just present briefly. This might be helpful. So here's the cost analysis of these 6 projects. So we're talking about 83rd right now. So basically the funding request is approximately 5.3 million. And based on the length of the corridor, we found a construction cost of approximately, all of the federal costs, total cost of about 13 million per mile for this project. So it's just helpful to kind of know if we're comparing based on the application information and the project lengths from that perspective. And then from a modeling perspective, which I did, I think I have to reshare a different document for this. So let me unshare and then reshare. Sorry about this. Okay. So here's the modeling perspective from based on a travel demand model, which I run, and we looked at network-wide impacts as well as corridor-level impacts on these projects. So we looked at how much does the project reduce vehicle hours traveled, which was one of the questions in the application. percentage-wise from the network as a whole network versus just the corridors in the immediate area. So the corridor itself that you said US 30, so we factored US 30 into that, so in the project area. And so for the Hobart 83rd Avenue project, we saw a savings for the whole network, this is all 3 counties, of 0.03%. So, I mean, again, it's a small scale project, but obviously it has a lot of local benefits. And then for the corridor level, we saw a savings of 3.6% in the build scenario over the no build. So just another point of comparison when we're looking at, from a technical perspective, we're looking at costs as well as impacts on the traffic and congestion from the modeling tools that we have. And the reason I put a less than 5% here as kind of a point of clarity is that if we were to carry this project forward through the NOFA process, it would also have to undergo the congestion management process analysis. So any project that exceeds 5% savings basically is exempted from having to show that. So most of these projects, the only ones that didn't, just FYI, was the Sherville Kennedy Avenue project, which showed a quarter level savings of 5.7%. So just wanted to let you know that wouldn't be due until April, when we actually take this before the TPC one final time before it's adopted. But we would have to basically work with the applicants to pursue the congestion management process if we were to carry these projects forward, if they didn't show at least a 5% savings. So that's a good discussion to start off with, I think. As far as the 83rd Avenue, we can go if there are any further questions at this time, either for myself or for Phil, if you're willing to answer any questions. Of course, I'd offer you that opportunity.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This question's for Phil. Phil, so would you be doing a NEPA document for the whole corridor that you're planning? The 2 roundabouts, this section of roadway, as well as the roadway behind Home Depot and behind the cinema, as well as connecting with the ring around the South Lake Mall?
It would be nice to have that all done, and I think that may be a good idea to avoid problems in the future.
And then where does the road continue after South Lake Mall, heading west?
If I remember the safety study correctly, the ring road on the south side of the mall would become public, and around to the I don't remember the mall entrance name there that connects to Mississippi Street, and then on the other side of Mississippi Street it goes into Maryville. But my memory is that it was an overpass on the south side there that would come down somewhere around the Century Mall site back to where Abuelos and Centier Bank and those are, and then it makes its way west. I think 83rd Avenue exists on the other side and crosses Broadway, and it makes it all the way to Maryville Road near Meyer, if I remember correct. And it's been years since I saw that study, but the corridor itself essentially is, as I remember it, is from Maryville Road in the Meyer area there in Maryville all the way to the Lake Porter County line.
I think, I just realized I was able to pull up the some of the other application documents, so I can share my screen if it's helpful to give a visual to everybody for where this is, at least. I'm not sure I can find that study very quickly, but here's just for point of reference. This is the project location here. It's just obviously, as we've been discussing, it's south of US 30, basically connecting 83rd to Harms Road and into Mississippi Street here. So, I'm sorry, Colorado Street. Yeah. So right here is the alignment projection that was submitted with the application. But what you're talking about is the study showed basically some kind of ring reliever south of 30.
All the way, yes.
Yeah, all the way over to
Yep.
Maryland Road, essentially. So this would be basically
Right.
part of that infrastructure. This would,
Right, it would be the first piece in, in Holbert's side, we're looking at least two, obviously. The one being this alignment, the second one being the connection from Colorado to the Ring Road, and then we may have to do some improvements to the Ring Road and that mall exit in the future. And that's something we are planning to discuss with the mall. They are talking about doing a subdivision to change their property lines around right now for their own benefit. And it's a talking point that we have with them, whether or not they want that to become a public street on the south side.
okay. So it's helpful to kind of realize the project in a broader perspective of a regional tie-in, I guess. So that's, so do we have any other discussions about this project?
Just to be clear, Phil, you guys have not begun any of the NOFA process on this, is that correct?
That's correct. Or, well, the NOFA process? Or-
I'm sorry, the NEPA process.
Yeah, that's what I thought you meant, but then I realized that's not what he said. Okay.
My mistake.
Yeah, no, we haven't started the NEPA process for this. Other than, we know there are some wetlands along Colorado right there that we've identified as part of our Colorado and US 30 intersection improvement safety project. So, but we have not done anything specifically for this project yet.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think it's, as we think we can go ahead and maybe move on to discuss the next project, unless there are any other lingering questions. I think we'll go on to the next one on the list was and this is a group 2 project, it's in LaPorte, but the north-south corridor phase 1, they're requesting PE to the tune of $935,322. And the project score, according to the committee, is a 69 for this project, just keep in mind. Do we have anybody from LaPorte available to discuss this project or on their behalf?
Scott, I'll try calling them, see what's going on.
Yeah, because I know that Sarah, yes?
It comes from a second pool of money. Does it really need to be part of the other 5 project discussions?
We were hoping to have a discussion as a committee about, there are some, they're trying to come in for PE, which is understandable. Basically the cost of this entire project, if it was built out, would be, I think, in the ballpark of, it's like $110 million roughly, somewhere in there.
190.
190. Okay, I saw 120 last or so, but okay.
Well, that's for the entire corridor, but this phase alone is 18 million.
So basically, this is a PE for an $18 million phase. So I think we were hoping to have a discussion about if there was a lot more strategy, but basically beyond just relying on, or at least if they were completely relying on our NERC funding, if there was some kind of phasing strategy to be had and some kind of cost benefit analysis that could look very carefully at this, because it sounds like this project would potentially expose us to some risks with Federal Highway Administration and meeting some of the prerequisites later down the line. Like, even though we might technically be able to request the PE, there would have to be a lot of concerns addressed. And so we were hoping to have a good discussion about that. So I can go into more detail about those, but we were hoping again for, let me see, Sarah, if we can get a hold of her, maybe.
Scott, this is Craig Phillips. I echo Sherville's comment. I mean, why are we mixing phase 1 and phase 2 in terms of the discussion today? I think it just confuses things. I think you should discuss the phase 2 project at the end of the phase 1 projects. Still have it today, but, you know, not confuse, you know, the two funding sources right now. That's just that's just a suggestion I have.
I appreciate the comment. We do consider each project in basically in isolation from what's applied for. So. But just to go back to Jeff's comment earlier that this is in group 2, so it is not competing against the other 5 projects that we're evaluating today in front of us, but it's just worth keeping in mind.
I'm going to go ahead with someone else. I'll get a hold of someone from LaPorte and get them on later on. Well, basically, I can show you some of the analysis just quickly that we did for the 83rd Avenue. So I'll just very quickly go through the financial analysis. Again, we're just looking at the phase here, to be fair, that's applied for in front of us today. For the PE that they're actually requesting their application. And we can see that this north-south corridor, so they're requesting, again, Charles mentioned that this, did you say, well, it's 12.5 million plus for the, basically what the construction would be for this phase. They're requesting 1 million, just under 1 million in PE. That's what the NOFA application is for. But doing the cost estimate from the total cost perspective of this portion is 9 million per mile. So it came out to be a little bit less than the 83rd Avenue project that we just talked about on a per mile basis. And then echoing that, we also did a modeling analysis, and that shows basically a network-wide. In this case, the model actually shows an increase in vehicle hours traveled. It's drawing more vehicles to the area, so 0.02% network-wide, and then in the corridor level, basically, it's showing the bill perspective also increases vehicle hours traveled, so it increases congestion and increases total vehicle throughput time by 12.3%, according to the model. So that was probably from all the different projects, that was actually the least savings or the most increase that we saw in this case. I mean, clearly there are some savings in downtown LaPorte itself. I did see that, but looking at basically the savings in downtown LaPorte were offset by increases in the bypass, essentially, or the north-south corridor. So yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and move on to the next project then. Hopefully we'll get a hold of. Scott, I'd like to point out that I've gone ahead and inflated everyone's request. If everyone remembers, I asked for everybody to give me, when they submitted their application, to put it in $2021.
Okay.
And I went ahead and inflated those requests and those total costs to $25 and $2026. So if you look at the requests on there, it may seem a little different than a little bit higher than what was originally asked, so that's why
That makes sense.
numbers.
Thank you for clarifying that, Charles. So next on our list, we have the Porter County Willow Creek Extension project. So I guess I'll first entertain if there's anybody from Porter County or on their behalf that would like to reintroduce this project.
Yeah, this is Bob Thompson. I'm on. I see Eric Wolverton is on. If Eric, if you don't mind, I'd like you to explain this, please.
Sure. This is the extension of Willow Creek Road from County Road 700 north on the north end down to US 30. What the county is applying for here is for construction money on phase 1. NERC currently has allocated funds for alignment study in 2 separate phases. The first phase extended from County Road 700 north down to State Road 130. The second phase extended from State Road 130 down to US 30. We're in the midst of obtaining an environmental document for the entire corridor. And as I mentioned, well, I guess I didn't mention there is design funds that have been allocated for the first phase, which is that 700 down to 130. So preliminary design is underway. It's about 50% complete on that northernmost segment. And so what this project is looking for is to secure construction dollars for that first phase. It would be a 2-lane roadway in the this initial phase of construction, but would also acquire a 100-foot corridor in right-of-way to accommodate possible future roadway expansion to 4 lanes. And I guess that's the project in an overview.
Thank you, Eric. Would Bob or anyone else, would you like to add anything? Or is that a good starting point for proceeding with our discussion? If so, so again, I'll actually, like I did for the 83rd Avenue, I can pull up a little bit more of a graphic about this project. It would help set the context more. Let's see. I can find it. Okay, so I'll pull up. Let me share my screen. Okay, so this is basically the initial phase that we already have in our planning documents from 700 north to State Road 130. And then, let me see if I can, thought there was a map in here of the entire corridor. Pretty sure that this application had the alignments. I mean, I can pull up a different document with the alignments. There would be, okay. So here's kind of the study showing as they were developing this project south of State Road 130, looking at some of the possible alignments here past, basically from State Road 130 down to US 30 as well. So these are still being studied. But basically, so like Eric said, this is the background of the project, and Willow Creek is also a legacy project in that the preliminary engineering and basically the environmental we've helped fund already. So that's kind of just an overview, and obviously they're seeking about 5.3 million in inflated costs additionally. for this project. So looking at our score and what how we've already reviewed this project, we're looking at a score of 58, a funding request nominally 4.6 million, but that inflated to about 5.3 million. And so it's a little bit of a higher score than the 83rd Avenue project in Hobart, and approximately the same funding request in this NOFA. I can also look at the technical analyses that we did, so I'll pull that up as well just to be consistent. Effective from Charles's figures, it's about $5 million in inflated costs that they're seeking. Came out to only be 5.21 million per mile. So that actually is that is the lowest cost per mile in what the project is proposing for a new roadway. And from a modeling perspective, let's see, I'm gonna share a different document. Bear with me, it's right here. So the Willow Creek Road network wide, again, this is looking at the entire network of Lakeport and LaPorte counties. So it actually showed a 0.2% increase in vehicle hours traveled. So that wasn't a savings. And looking at the corridor level, these figures, again, I was looking just at the alignment itself, basically from 700 North to US 30 versus the alternative route of currently it's basically 625 West to State Road 130 to 475 West. And so comparing the two, it actually showed a 34.3% basically increase in vehicle hours traveled. I know that that's not the only analysis that NERC's ever done on this project. Obviously, in the regional corridor study project that we did a few years ago, we showed a substantial savings in vehicle hours traveled using a different methodology of looking at the corridors within 2 miles. So I know that this project has in the past registered a major savings in vehicle hours traveled. Just didn't necessarily show up in this methodology that we used alongside the projects in this NOFA application. But essentially, and I said earlier, this is basically one of the 2 legacy projects that we're looking at today, along with the Kennedy Avenue project. I will add that. So there's already some momentum there, if that helps the committee in deciding, or at least in helping frame the discussion.
Yes, Scott, this is Iman. I have a question. Is the increase in the corridor, is that because it's a new corridor, right? And
right, so
we're adding traffic because it's a new corridor.
Yeah, so basically you're right. It's also showing the effect of drawing traffic potentially away from maybe even corridors as far as I-65 or State Road 49. Probably not that far away, but possibly that far away. And it's drawing that traffic into this corridor. So obviously it's going to show more vehicles. So that might be the vehicle part of the equation, because the traffic counts would be increasing when you build something like that. I just want to point out that, yeah, we did study this also in the regional corridor studies, several years ago, and we showed a very substantial savings in some of the other measures of congestion, like levels of service. And so, I mean, I can pull that study up too, but yeah, the study of the 34.2% increase that I did for this discussion today was purely based on comparing the build project with the alternative route of, I guess that would be 625 West, State Road 130, and 475 West combined. And so it was obviously, there are a lot more vehicles in the build scenario than that alternative route. So it makes sense why the number would be a lot higher.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so are there any other questions or discussions to be had about the Willow Creek project?
Scott, I think in reflection of your calculations, the municipalities and their consultants should review those numbers and see if they want to improve them. And that's in all cases. I'm not quite following, Willow Creek, because that's the most recent one, that we're alleviating congestion in other parts of our transportation network. But it's true, as Iman said, we're going to have substantially more traffic on that road as the course of an improvement. And I think that's part of our goal. I think it also alleviates, and it's my personal opinion, and needs to be backed up with other numbers, that will alleviate some of the congestion, air pollution, because the level of service is going to substantially improve. And that's
right.
True of all these roads.
Yeah, and drawing on the reflection, at least in the case study you just mentioned with Willow Creek, I do now recall that in the regional corridor study calculations that we did several years ago, we've specifically looked at the local alternatives. So in this case, it was like 450 West, I think was basically you're drawing a lot less traffic off of that if you were to build this. And essentially that savings was reflected in the regional corridor study analysis several years ago. So it made this project look better, I think, because we're looking at the more specific local alternatives. So we're looking specifically at like 450 West and State Road 130 south from 700. And so when we looked at those very local alternatives, yes, this project looked like it was drawing a lot of congestion off the roads. Like you said, the goal was to basically draw the traffic off those roads and put it onto this road. But I do think what you said does make sense from, I know that this is not a lot of time to review some of these figures, perhaps.
It's a starting point for all of this discussion. So I appreciate what you and Charles have done. But I think now the ball's in the court of the municipalities to figure out where they want to go from here.
Okay. Any other discussions about Willow Creek? Any questions?
Question or make a point. If somebody from Structure Point could clarify how far along are you on this in the NEPA process?
Sure. This is Chris Murphy with Structure Point. We are in the process of completing all our field investigation work, including the historic and archaeological investigations along the alignments that have been identified for further study as part of the NEPA development process. We expect to have the NEPA document complete and a public hearing later on this year in 2021, so that we'd be in a position to start acquiring right-of-way on the phase one portion of the project, which is what the request for construction dollars is for, starting the right-of-way acquisition in fiscal year 2022. The engineering for an actual alignment on phase one is progressing, so that as we is scheduled to complete the land acquisition, we will have construction documents ready to bid sometime as early as in the fiscal year 2024 timeframe. So even though we're asking for construction dollars in this fiscal year 2025, 2026, we should be ready prior to that if construction dollars are available.
My point of the question was to exemplify that there are a couple projects here that have had significant local investment and money already put into them to move them forward. These are the two legacy projects that we are considering today.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you for the discussion. I think we can move on to the Town of St. John's Klein Avenue project. And does Craig or anybody want to reintroduce that project briefly?
Sure. This is a just over 1 mile connection between 93rd Avenue on the north and 101st Avenue on the south. It's an important connection due to the fact that there's an undue burden being placed upon Blaine Street, which is just about a quarter mile to the east, parallel to the proposed roadway connection. This is an important roadway from a regional standpoint because it's connecting several communities on the west side of Lake County, fast-growing communities where there's a lot of additional anticipated growth that's expected. A lot of proposed subdivisions in various stages of completion and planning that are either immediately adjacent to or in very close proximity to this roadway. It's a partnership between several communities. Doesn't just serve the town of St. John, and it serves as an important relief valve for a north-south traffic that would normally be utilizing US 41 largely, or local roads that are overtaxed and overburdened by the current traffic patterns that exist in this area. Basically having to do the jog as development in the community and the communities and the nearby communities goes forward. We're going to see additional strain being put upon local roads that aren't meant to carry the levels of traffic that this project would anticipate basically providing for in the future. This was also listed as one of the projects in the regional corridor study, one of the priority projects in the regional corridor study. And north to south, it connects immediately connects Griffiths and Sherville to the north, through St. John to Cedar Lake and portions of the county, and ultimately Lowell to the south. And then, in larger scheme, connects all the way up to Lake Michigan by way of the other, section of Klein Avenue, barring the railroad interruptions in Griffith. So I think everybody can understand that Klein Avenue is a very significant roadway within that portion of the region. And it's probably long overdue that, we've been seeking the funding necessary to get this project done. And the growth that's occurring in that area is going to outpace the capacity of the roadway to handle that growth in the future if we don't, provide for this linkage. So I don't know if anybody else, if Jerry or Brian wants to add, or Eric wants to add anything to that.
I guess barring none, I can again give a brief geographic overview with the application materials that were provided. Thank you, Craig, for that brief introduction. Didn't immediately see the alignment drawn in, but I just found a map on the application that would basically show where this project is. Essentially, it would just be this little missing gap of Klein Avenue between 93rd and 101st Avenue. It's really literally the only missing gap on Klein Avenue for, miles to the north. And so that's good to know. It was indeed part of our regional corridor study process several years ago. It's primarily residential in the immediate vicinity, very fast growing residential area. I guess, so we can pull up some of the technical figures that we found in our analysis from a cost perspective and from a modeling perspective. So from a cost perspective, This is Klein Avenue project. The inflated request was approximately $7.5 million. The cost per mile, about $10 million per mile. So it falls pretty much where you would expect, kind of in the middle of the pack there. And then from a modeling perspective, we're looking at Klein Avenue. So St. John. The network-wide impact was a savings of 0.1%. So this actually did register at a 3-county level, but even at the more local level, at the quarter level, looking just in that little gap area between 93rd Avenue and 101st Avenue, about a 3.8% savings in vehicle hours traveled. So savings in congestion throughput. So it's still a little bit less than the 5% threshold that we'd like to see for exemption from doing a congestion management process, but still within, that's nothing. So that's what we found from a technical perspective. Briefly, I guess, and I apologize for not giving Willow Creek an opportunity, but going back to original discussion that we had with 83rd Avenue, looking at the potential benefits. So we obviously talked about costs, but benefits, particularly in terms of potential revenue sources that this could either directly tap into or catalyze in some way. So are there any, I know this is more of a residential area than the City of Hobart's project, but are there any other considerations that we should be talking about from an economic perspective for this project?
Yeah, but I think that this project, as I stated, is an important relief valve north-south to US 41.
Yep.
By alleviating some of the traffic congestion on US 41 between the communities north and south and throughout St. John, we provide better access to employment centers and retail areas that it's a challenge in some cases to access. By taking some of that local traffic off of 41, you have better access to a developing corridor. The corridor is also developing into a medical corridor, and several medical facilities have purchased significant quantities of land along 41. Further, I guess increasing the importance of the 41 corridor as a major north-south connection. So anything we can do to alleviate congestion on the 41 corridor, and I think we don't have to argue that Klein Avenue is an important relief valve for that corridor, much more so than even other roads in that area. Then I think that demonstrates the economic benefit of this project by alleviating that congestion along what is a very major commercial and economic corridor for the western portion of the county.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That's helpful. And I didn't want to suggest that you needed to necessarily have direct business access in order to have a discussion about economic benefits. Travel time savings, of course, in and of themselves are economic benefits. But it's good to know more of that background about developing into a medical corridor. And I see that you have, not that the other projects didn't, but you had letters of support from Lake County and the town of Sherville as well that you tie into essentially. So it's good to see that.
Mr. Chairman, this is Dean Button. May I be heard, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to point out that Klein Avenue does not go all the way to Lake Michigan. There's a segment where Klein Avenue ends in Main Street in Griffith and doesn't pick back up until Avenue D in Griffith. And so
I made that point.
It does not. Okay.
I made that point earlier.
Okay. So are there any questions that might help clarify matters for consideration about this project?
Has this project begun anything in the NEPA process?
No, but we have received commitment at the local level as well as from other communities to participate in that process. So discussions have taken place about starting that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other matters of clarification? So I would like, obviously, as we mentioned with the Hobart 83rd Avenue project, it's not a legacy project. If it was selected, it would be subject to some additional requirements. Among them, I mentioned the congestion management process, as well as it would require being included in the plan amendments or NWI 2050 plan that has a list of projects, since it would have to be added to that. But again, we would be doing a batch amendment anyway with all of the projects that would need to be added, but it would just have to be included there. So we might have to require some more financial information from the applicant if this were selected. Again, that wouldn't be due till, well, the public comment period begins in March, so probably by the end of February or so, we would want to have that information. Just some background information about what the follow-up matters would be for these. I guess then we can continue on to that's our new roadways project category discussion. These projects were all reviewed already at this committee where we scored them. So you can see where those scores land. This one landed at 65, for example. So that puts it nominally ahead of all of the Group 1 projects, I guess, with 83rd Avenue and Willow Creek Road and Klein Avenue, behind the City of LaPorte's north-south corridor, but that's a Group 2 project, 69. So now we can move on to the next category of projects that we were going to discuss today, which were roadway expansions and the Quality of Place program. I would like to note that we did not review these projects already at the Surface Transportation Committee. They were reviewed at the Land Use Committee. And it's actually really kind of the same project because it's just two different phases of the town of Sherville's Kennedy Avenue project that we'd be discussing today, phases 3 and 4. So I guess we can go ahead and I can hand it over to, I don't know if Jeff or Tom or anybody else wants to introduce the Sherville Kennedy Avenue Phase 3 project to start with.
Very briefly, I'll take that. Kennedy Avenue is a project which would expand the capacity of the roadway and make it contiguous in conjunction with the corridor study from NERC, from Main Street all the way to Route 30. A portion of this road would be new roadway. Most of it would be expanding the existing corridor. We have completed the NEPA process to the point that we have made our route selections, and we are moving forward with the submittals that will need to be approved by NDOT in the NEPA process. We have legacy project status on this from former projects. This has been in the tip since 2011, and it has been moving forward steadily every year. I would like to go on to talk a little bit about the scoring systems that we've employed. Criteria that should be looked at in addition to the scoring, the NOFA scoring process. Number 1, legacy status. Projects including Kennedy have been determined in the past to be so important that seed money was granted to them and they were added to the tip. These projects have already gone through the congestion mitigation scoring model, and they have been determined to have a reduction in vehicle hours traveled. They are part of the regional corridor study that have been evaluated, and the regional corridor study explored many more aspects than the NOFA expanded. The level of service, congestion, crash data, roadway connectivity, demographics, environmentals, and such, and those were what was considered when they made the corridor study. From the status of project development, again, we are well afoot in the NEPA process. We have not spent any federal or NERC money on this. We have a significant local investment in the NEPA process that we funded ourselves. We have done work with our CACs. We have done work with NDOT and FHWA. We believe that above and beyond the NOFA scoring process, many of these other factors should be considered. Not that we don't disagree that the 83rd, the Klein Avenue projects are important as well. We just believe that things like Willow Creek and Kennedy Avenue that have been afoot for many years should take priority in the funding process. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for that introduction to the project. Is there anything that should be added for the introduction? If not, thank you. I can, again, I'll pull up the geographic layout of the project, just so we can more clearly visualize what we're talking about. And again, this is their application for phase 3. So this is basically the alignment of the entire suite of all 4 phases of the Kennedy Avenue project in green, from Main Street to Joliet Street / US 30. So the phase 3 segment, if we're talking about phase 3, would be from Main Street to Oak Street. So the northern portion of the project. And they're using the existing right-of-way for their alignments for this. And it's expanding from 1 travel lane in each direction to 2 travel lanes in each direction, as far as what they claim in their application and from what we've heard. So again, it's a legacy project in terms of, basically this is a continuation. And at various other points and phases on this project, they are potentially tapping into, I know that there's still a lot going on with the local tracks, but basically other funding sources as well as this NOFA process. So it's good to know that there's a diversity of potential funding sources that they've been pursuing for this. So I guess we can have a discussion again, like we did for the other projects, about from a cost benefit analysis perspective. So obviously we know a lot of information about the costs from how you apply for the project, but should we be discussing anything from a benefits perspective about how you're specifically helping access to local businesses in the area, potential funding sources that this project could tap into or help catalyze if we were to select this project?
The north end of this project touches a major, pretty significant employment center in the Shops on Main area. In the Highland side of that as well, it provides for access to through Highland on Kennedy Avenue, which is already pretty much a completed corridor. It touches Route 30 at the south end, which is, again, within a quarter mile of very significant retail and employment centers and areas. It would go a long way to relieve a lot of corridor on the US 41 route, state route. That route is currently carrying about 35,000 cars a day each direction. And we believe that this would be a significant relief to that congestion. We believe that we'll be able to provide a pretty significant improvement in the level of service to both roads with this project.
Okay. So that's helpful to help frame some of the discussion around potential benefits as well as costs. So I guess we can again look at some of the technical analyses that we performed about the project. So looking at the cost perspective, Charles looked at the inflated costs, and we found that the request here is about $5.8 million. The phase 3 portion came out to be about $14.2 million per mile, which is definitely on the high end, as you can see here. And then we looked at the model analysis and found for the Sherville project, again, this actually includes really all 4 phases, but from a network-wide perspective, it's not really registering much as a Lakeport and LaPorte County level of 0.2% increase in vehicle hours traveled. But looking at the corridor level, just in the immediate vicinity of US, this takes US 41 into account, as well as the portions of Joliet Street and Main Street that tie into US 30 and US 41. We found a savings of 5.7%. So again, that is above the threshold of the 5% that we look at for going further into a congestion management process. So that's good to see. I guess that's a brief overview of the technical analyses that we performed about it. Are there any further questions or discussions about the project? Okay, so it's good, helpful information to have. I see that Sarah Nimitz from City of LaPorte was able to join us. So if we want to go back, circle back to we have one more phase of Sherville, Kennedy Avenue, if we want to, because we were on that. So why don't we finish up the discussion there first? So anything about phase 4 that you want to add?
Well, the thing about phase 4, I think I'd like to bring forward is that last year we had to give up the funds for phase 1 because our NEPA process was not working, moving as quickly as we found. In that NEPA process and scoping, we found that phase 1, as submitted in 2011, should logically be our 4th phase to construct. So once we had to pull that funding and give it back, I mean, that's where Willow Creek got a portion of their funding for their NEPA process. We had to get back in line. We didn't understand when we had to go to the back of the line that we'd be rescored and revisited. But phase 4 of Kennedy Avenue used to be phase 1 and was approved as phase 1. It will continue to move forward carrying the 2011 designation number as the NEPA process would require.
Okay, so what you're applying for in your phase 4 application for this NOFA is, from an environmental perspective, already covered from the existing phase 1, but you're seeking additional funding for, because, I mean, so you're not saying that you're not interested in phase 4, right? You're saying that,
We're just saying that it should be the 4th phase. The project is divided into 4 phases, and this
Okay.
should be the last one constructed.
okay, so you're saying that this is just a extension.
It
It got rephased along the way is what you're basically saying.
Exactly. The
Okay.
sequence has changed.
Yeah, we understand that. And so just to clarify, phase 4, as is applied for in this application, is the portion from US 30 to Junction Avenue. So this is the portion that has the actual gap where there wasn't right of way before.
That's correct. There used to be a railroad corridor that went through there. The railroad has been abandoned, and we have constructed a portion of the Pensy Greenway crosses that corridor.
Right. Okay. So just so that everyone's aware, when we look, again, share this geographically, it's this portion right here where the little jog is in the alignment on their application. That would be the phase 4 portion. And so this portion is if we go back to the application, seeking about 6.4 million nominally, and we look at the inflated costs are about 7.0 million is what we came up with for the inflated costs. And I can look at the technical analysis for this portion from a cost perspective. You actually ended up with a slightly better cost per mile for phase 4 somehow, I guess, at 10.9 million. So again, that's still like about average or a little bit above average really for a new roadway alignment right around there. So, and it's good to know, just to consider. And then also looking at, we already looked at the travel demand model impacts on congestion for all 4 phases. It was really too difficult to isolate out any individual phase for anything substantial. So I guess then, are there any questions about either phase 4 specifically, or any of our phase 3 for that matter, which we discussed earlier? I know that this was not discussed at this committee. It was at the land use committee. Perhaps several of you attended that. I know Iman's here if she wanted to weigh in about any discussions that the land use committee had about this project that might be relevant.
Mr. Chairman, Dean Button, please. Thank you. Jeff, if I might ask, is there, in the NERC application for projects, there was a priority, you had a priority of your projects. Where does this, and perhaps you covered it earlier, but where in the Sherville list of projects does this project rank in your applications in terms of what you want funded?
Well, Kennedy is looked at as one large project with several phases. Again, phase 4 would be the old phase 1 or phase 4 now would be the last phase constructed. We are moving forward with our tracks project, which is being funded by NDOT as that goes over the railroad tracks just about a half a mile north of Main Street. Then the new phase 1 will be the aprons to that, or the areas that touch that bridge. Then and the bridge has been deemed phase 1 now. Phase 2 would be the approaches to the bridge. Phase 3 would be the northernmost corridor, and phase 4 would be the connection to Route 30.
So is it safe to say that in your list of applications to NERC, your phase 3 project would be your higher priority or your phase 4 project would be your higher priority?
Phase 3 would be our higher priority at this time.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for the information. And just for the record, the phase 3 scored 4 points higher than the phase 4 as well in the land use committee's review, 62 versus 58. So that's helpful. I guess then we can circle back to the City of LaPorte's north-south corridor phase 1 PE request, because I see Sarah is on the meeting apparently. So Sarah, would you like to introduce the project? Or
and Sarah's on the meeting, also Nick Minnick, City Engineer.
Oh, I see you're here too.
I do apologize. Our Board of Works falls at 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning, so had to be at that one also. We did request PE for the first phase of the north-south corridor. The north-south corridor has been in development for quite some time. LaPorte County's taken the lead, and we've worked together cooperatively to kind of go back and forth on who's taking the lead on different phases. The county has moved the NEPA document very far along, and we see that in order to actually get our NEPA document approved, we also need to have both PE and right-of-way funded for at least one phase of this project. We're also working with INDOT on looking at some relinquishment opportunities and other things like that. But we did put in our application for funding to begin the design work for the first phase. The first phase is between Highway 35 and Highway 4 here in LaPorte. And again, this is kind of a realignment that will look at some relinquishment opportunities. And this phase kind of offers the opportunity to work with INDOT and start to springboard into the rest of the corridor, which is very key for not only truck traffic through the city of LaPorte that's projected to really choke out the opportunity for us to grow and develop and have a livable center here in our city, but also economic opportunities that the county has with their Kingsbury Industrial Park and other things. So we're very excited about the project, and we're excited to get to this point where we're starting to move into design and have a NEPA document with alternatives ready to approve once we do have this design funded and right away.
Okay, thank you, Nick, for the introduction for this project, and I also want to draw everyone's attention geographically to what we're talking about here in their application. It's very neatly drawn out here. So the phase 1 is this green portion, like Nick said, from US 35 to State Road 4. They're seeking the PE, the preliminary engineering in this NOFA process, about $935,000. So that's what's in front of us to look more closely at. Again, this is a group 2 project, so it's in a kind of a different universe than all the other 5 projects in that sense, because this project is not competing per se against those other 5 projects. That said, it's very much competing against other group 2 projects elsewhere in other project and program types in our NOFA. But so in front of us today, though, is to evaluate this project and to determine our recommendations of whether to continue to advance it through the NOFA process in front of the Technical Planning Committee, TPC, in the next couple of months. So with that brief introduction to the North-South Corridor Phase 1 PE in the city of LaPorte, we can again, and Nick kind of brought this up briefly with the discussion of the cost and benefit analysis, so specifically talking about some of the benefits of the project. I think it's helpful to get an overview. You mentioned the Kingsbury. I mean, that's a little bit south of this project itself, but basically help facilitate mobility between some of the developments outside the project area. Are there any specific considerations that we should be taking into account as far from a benefits perspective? I mean, obviously we know the costs are substantial, but how do you see, what types of either funding sources that you could tap into? I mean, I know you mentioned potential relinquishments with INDOT, but are there any other considerations that we need to be taking into account from a benefits perspective that might help alleviate the stress on relying on federal funding through NERC that you foresee? I mean, you don't necessarily have to know what they would be yet, but that we should be discussing.
One of the things that we've been able to do, and we'll have to continue to coordinate very closely with INDOT on this and make sure that they're still comfortable with this. But the planning and NEPA have all been done by the county, and those are actually Group 3 funds, I believe. So because this corridor spans kind of the inside and outside the urbanized area, we're looking at quite a few different funding sources and potential partners within that too. So we have several TIF districts that join this. We have both the county and the city, committed to moving this forward. So those two entities have, different funding sources available. And then with this being a project that kind of spans both within and outside of the urbanized area, I think it's going to be key to work with INDOT to try and access some of the Group 3 dollars. It's in proximity to the toll road, and I think there's some potential funding there too. So we have quite a range of potential funding sources that we're working on to make sure that we can have the project all come together. But again, I think we're kind of also in a chicken or the egg scenario where we have utility even with this first phase, because it does allow the city to start to do some relinquishment. So just even moving forward with one phase starts to get us to a place where we can have an approved NEPA and finalize a lot of those funding sources that we've been working with different entities on.
Okay. So, because it looks like in your application, you claim that you're already essentially working toward a completed NEPA by 2022 or so?
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that that's very much in progress, so that's still attainable.
Yes.
Okay. So, okay, again, from when this committee looked at this project, obviously on paper it scored really high. It's a huge project, right? It scored a 69, I think. It was actually the highest scoring project per se, but that largely, of course, that's due to the fact that because it's so big, it was able to touch on a lot of the application criteria that were in there. And I guess I will admit that in reviewing the application, I guess I took into account the other phases too, and probably attaining some of those points. So let's see, there were 6 phases in this, and so if we look strictly at phase 1, I would be concerned that the score would be potentially a little lower than that, just to start off with. But in terms of the request, it's not, I mean, the PE portion, sure, that's not out of scale for what we would, I mean, it's still a big PE, but it's not out of scale for what we look at in the NOFA. We just have to be concerned going forward that we were very strategic about phasing this along, because I'm sure you've heard from my colleague Charles about, we have, only so much funding that we get in Group 2. There has to be, a very very clear sequencing of logical termini along the way. If we were to be able to fit this in with the scope of what we're able to fund from the sources that we're given to administer. And we can, not said we can be an advocate for this project, but we just have to decide realistically if by funding this or going forward with choosing to fund this through our funds, if there's the sense that everything could stay on track, because we don't want to, the worst outcome would be to give you a false impression that things are booked, but there's going to be tons of problems down the road that we're just diminishing. So it's better to know more upfront. And also we would have to, I guess, know a little bit more information about the financials of this project were to move forward. Again, some of those are going to be unknown, but so if we're looking strictly at phase one, we have potentially enough information, but it's better to get an idea of the cost estimates for each of those phases, I guess. So are there any, and I see that that detail was provided at an estimate level at least. Are there any discussions or questions about this?
I have one question. This is Charles.
Yep.
Nick, you said that you're looking at using a different variety of Group 3 and Group 2 funds. This portion, this phase is in the urbanized area, so it's only going to get Group 2 funds.
Correct.
So the total cost is $12.5 million for this phase.
Mm-hmm.
And if Group 2 only gets $2 million a year, how is?
We're not looking at Group 2 as our sole source of funding for the project. We're looking at Group 2 as the opportunity to do design work and right-of-way work. Not, design work is for sure, and potentially right-of-way work with a future NOFA or something, but we're not necessarily asking NERC to use Group 2 funds to construct this project at this point. And we understand that there's an element of risk in that we have to figure out how to secure the 12 million for construction. But that is something that as a city we're committed to moving this forward. So again, we're not asking for Group 2 construction dollars that exceed the amount available by that much.
Okay. But then you also don't have any, you're still looking for ways to fund the construction.
Correct.
Because one of the things that that has to be decided by the time you turn in your NEPA draft is how you're going to fund not only this portion, but all the portions of the project. Mm-hmm. So all 6 phases.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess then, going back to the committee's consideration, so yeah, I will say FYI, the score of 69 does reflect all 6 phases. So if we're looking at just phase 1, I apologize that it'd be a rescore. That wouldn't be much lower, but obviously it took into account points from all 6 phases combined. I guess then the question, we still would need information about all 6 phases in order to meet the prerequisites for showing that the NEPA process could be in place if we were to choose to fund what's being applied for the phase 1 PE. So I don't know if it's fair. I guess it is fair to take into account that essentially there'd be a commitment to future phases, at least in some sense from the environmental perspective. So maybe it is fair to score it as the score that we see here as 69. But I would just want to clarify that, you know, that score that looks really high does include all 6 phases. So. I guess it would be helpful to know, like Charles was saying, so, I mean, you provided very detailed cost estimates for the other 5 phases. Would we see, do you foresee there being risks in being able to show some of the revenue sources for meeting those costs for the other 5 phases within the NEPA timeframe? Or, I mean, I know you might not have all that detail right now, but are there processes in place that you're actively pursuing that that you've been discussing with other entities besides NERC?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to get the sense of.
No, we've been in discussions with INDOT locally. That's where we're starting to work on a relinquishment plan that will move forward to, you know, eventually take downstate also. So we have been working on that, and that's something that is running simultaneous with kind of the tail end of the NEPA. I mean, we have about a you know, 6 to 9 month window here of when our public process and reviews and everything will be done, and then, you know, we'll be looking for a stronger understanding of what the relinquishment dollars look like, and then also what other dollars would be available to us. So we are moving in that direction, and then we're in the right timeline to get there.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that there were processes in place that were actively being followed.
Yeah, it's very hard to get commitments for dollars before we have an approved alignment, but it's also very hard to get a final approved alignment without commitment of dollars. So it is a very iterative process that there is some risk involved in. But again, we have both LaPorte County and especially the city of LaPorte very committed to making sure that we move the project forward.
Okay. I guess, I mean, just to be fair to the other 5 projects that are being evaluated today, we will look at the technical analyses that we've performed in terms of cost and travel demand model congestion improvement. So we'll look first at the cost analysis here. We look at the north-south corridor. Okay, we're looking just at phase 1 here because that's what's being applied for. It's approximately $1 million in inflated costs for the PE, and it comes out to basically, for the total cost perspective, it comes out to be $9 million per mile for what you're applying for this project, which is actually right about in the middle of it's about average. So, well, technically it's the second cheapest, but you know, some of them are really high. So anyway, that's what we're looking at from a cost perspective for the alignment, and then for the travel demand model congestion analysis, we're looking at we look both network-wide impacts as well as just the corridor level impacts of the project, looking at vehicle hours traveled, which is vehicles times the amount of time it takes those vehicles to travel through. So from a 3-county perspective, it barely registers actually 0.02% increase. And those were the figures that we corresponded with over email in deciding how to award points in the application. But then looking at the corridor level, this was interesting. The build perspective, and this is all 6 phases, showed a savings of, an increase of 12.3%. Looking at, again, the level of impact at the local level on the corridor from the alternative route, which was, I think, looking at all 6 phases from the toll road, essentially on the north was State Road 39, US 35 to where it junctions with Boyd Boulevard. That is the alternative route that was used in the no-build and then basically the build perspective of the 6-phase alignment. So it actually showed an increase in vehicle hours traveled, but not by a huge amount, but it was, we didn't see a savings there, just information that we got from our travel demand model. So that's what we looked at. Obviously, there were savings in downtown LaPorte, for example, if we were to look at that in isolation, but there weren't savings, overall. But so yeah, it's clearly a very large scale project. This would just be the first phase of that for PE. If that helps the committee. Are there any questions about this project? Additional questions or clarifying matters? I guess then, so going back to a larger perspective of all 6 projects, again, those are 4 new roadway projects and 2 quality of place roadway expansion projects. Does the committee have any decisions regarding either outright decisions about how to rank or which projects to carry forward, or decisions about a methodology that we would use to decide which projects to carry forward? We have scores, we have costs, we have legacy projects, we have, other information potentially that we've gone over today.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I have a question for Scott. I was wondering why he came up with a 5% as far as using that for the model, as far as savings goes.
Okay, I can address that. That was consistent with the MOVE NWI congestion management process that we adopted as a commission in September. That in that plan, it says that if the 5% threshold of vehicle hours traveled savings, either at a network-wide or a corridor level, if you can show 5% or more, then you're not subject to basically adhering to that congestion management process. Now, when I say adhering to, it's very much a checklist type of process. So if we decide on furthering an application or funding an application that would have to adhere to that, it would very much be attainable to complete that by April, which would have to be completed by, well, really by March when we have our public comment period. But it's pretty much a checklist of showing that you're looking at these other strategies or that you adhere to these strategies to reduce congestion. But yeah, that 5% just comes directly from that plan.
Okay, no, that's fine. The other question I had was when you're talking about, I'm sorry, but when you're looking at the difference between the amount that's estimated and the amount that the request is for, does that reflect a percentage of what the municipality is paying, or is that just an inflated number?
Charles, do you have clarification on that? You came up with the, and when we did the cost analysis, when we looked at those, I think you said inflation, but were there any other considerations?
Yes, I looked at what they were asking for, and I inflated that cost as well as the total cost. I believe everyone was asking for 20%. The only one that asked for less was, 80%. The one that asked for less, I believe, was Klein Avenue, St. John, which asked for 75% of the cost.
So
yes,
do either of those two factors should either of those two factors affect the decision that the committee makes?
I'll leave that to the committee.
I guess as a committee member, then I would ask the chairman if that should be accounted in the decision-making process, or we just go by the scoring that's there.
for commentary, I'd like to ask whether or not that was in the scoring at all already, because I don't want to have it double counted. This is David Wright.
Yes, thank you.
I guess that's a staff question, maybe, whether or not it was part of the scoring process at all.
Charles, do you have a quick answer? Was the basically the request for the inflation factor in and of itself reflected in the scoring, or was that simply
or the match,
or for the match?
Well, I would have gotten the extra points for going above 20%, because that was one of the questions in the application.
So
I believe that was already considered, Scott.
yeah, so it should already be reflected, I think, in the score.
That would be my view.
Tom, this is Craig Phillips. Can I ask a question? I think that the same could be said for, and I wasn't involved in the decision making with regard to how the scoring was set up, but the same could be said for legacy projects receiving a higher score, and that was built into the scoring as well.
That is true.
With that, however, I would make a point that I think our discussions in the past are reflective that we perhaps underrated the pointing for legacy projects in the scoring process. I know that we have discussed that in the past and in other meetings in relation to this. The two legacy projects here, have the danger of dying if we don't keep moving forward and keep them in the schedule and with funding applied to it. These are things that we committed to greatly in the past 9 years now, 10 years now, like I say, going back to 2011.
Okay. Well, I mean, it sounds like we could have a hearty discussion about this. I mean, there are always going to be lessons learned from any NOFA scoring framework that's put together, I'm sure, but it is accurate that the legacy project status is a question in the application.
And I guess another statement would be that there have been other conversations throughout the scoring review process, or the committee review of the scores, that there was some frustration with the way that scores were set, but it was decided that that changes were not going to be made to that because that's how the scores were set up.
Well, I mean, I think, I guess I think it's worth discussing, what I guess as a committee, there's a decision that you are entitled to make today. So that's something, obviously it's for the committee. It's not for staff or any one individual applicant to make. It sounds like there was a question regarding what would happen if a legacy project were to die off because of a lapse in of funding. I think that, I mean, obviously in theory, the applicant would have an opportunity to apply in a subsequent NOFA. So it's not like it's eliminating that applicant from ever applying for that project. There could still be some risks and reality that are faced when something like that were to happen. So again, we'd have to look at the time frames here. And then I think the other thing that we have to consider as a committee, or that I think you should consider as a committee, is how much of this is dependent on decisions that you would make here today in and of themselves versus dependence on decisions that the technical planning committee would make regarding other project types and funding categories. Because potentially any decision that this committee would make would be subject to a final review by the technical planning committee, or potentially subject to funds already consumed by other projects further up in tier 1, for example, since this is a tier 2 that we're talking about today. So I think that those are other considerations that I think might be worth considering.
Overall, I think we have to have a larger discussion. I mean, we've got sidewalk projects, we've got $3 million approved in sidewalk projects. That is probably, they aren't going to get anybody to and from work. They aren't going to relieve congestion. They aren't going to, overall, our whole scoring process, although it was developed in conjunction with the 2050 matrix, I think there are some inequities in it. Things that can be funded, locally should be funded locally, and we should use our federal dollars for things that we wouldn't be able to do if it weren't for the federal funding. I mean, my own thought is that out of today's discussions, we should recommend to the technical planning committee that the Kennedy phases and the Willow Creek phases move forward. Perhaps some seed money go to the St. John project, as it did score very well in the system, and get the process moving on that. Again, the NEPA process takes a long time. I wish that I could tell you in 10 years we've gotten our NEPA document approved, but I can't tell you that. We are close. We are ready for our public hearings almost. We're inches away from them. But, we did have to give funding back, and we're looking to keep our project moving forward. I'd like comment on the proposal to recommend to the TPC that we recommend Kennedy and Willow Creek move forward, and perhaps some seed money for St. John's project on Klein Avenue.
That was a motion. Second.
I didn't make it in the form of a motion, but I'd appreciate it. I don't know if that's proper with Councilman Schmidt sitting next to me chairing the meeting. If it's proper for me to make a motion.
Still support it.
State your name, please, for a second motion.
Well, if that wasn't a full motion and everything, this is Bob Thompson, Porter County.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second it. This is George Topple, Union Township.
We have a motion.
Wait, then we have a motion. We have a second.
I guess I have a question, Mr. Chairman. So
yes,
the purpose of the scoring, I mean, the St. John project scored higher than that. So I'm just wondering what the process is here. So we're just kind of eliminating that high score.
I would say that the motion on the floor in the second would be to continue because of the legacy projects, and these projects are already started and several dollars have been put to it. I believe that that's being brought out as an important factor to keep these projects going.
point of discussion, Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Swatz, the NEPA process for Klein Avenue, it's going to be long-winded. And there are going to be many opportunities, or I don't know many, there will be future opportunities for you to request more funding and resubmit for phases and moving forward. But getting the NEPA process and getting it underway is huge in the completion of your project. And it will likely be a minimum of 6 to 7 years before, you know, that process can move forward and get approvals. Thank you.
I have a motion and I had a second on the floor. I'd have to call for a roll call vote. Flora, would you be able to take a roll call vote for us?
Yes, I can. Just give me one moment to find my document. I'm sorry.
Now that you had you've had a motion and a second, is there opportunity for more discussion?
You called for the vote.
Yeah, I would accept more discussion.
Given that the direction seems to be that some members of the committee are favoring the legacy projects despite scoring, would there be consideration to allowing St. John to receive funding for the engineering for this project? The reason I say that is because a portion of the construction funding obviously only gets us so far, and our project can't be broken into construction phases, as you know. So given I'm wondering if there's the possibility of funding the entirety of the PE for our project as opposed to construction. That gets us in the hopper, but it gives us an effective way to move this project forward.
That might be a question that needed for Charles or for Scott.
I mean, Charles is the mastermind of the NOFA process and how it plays out from a financial and fitting things in perspective. I know that type of maneuver wouldn't necessarily be I mean, I think if the TPC was willing to consider that, I don't know if that's a decision that would be.
We've done it in the past.
Has it been done in the past? I'm not sure. We've only really gone through this type of process one other time where we holistically looked at all project types in the same NOFA at the same time 2 years ago. I believe, Charles, you know if there was a similar, or does anybody from the TPC recall if there was a maneuver of basically allowing a project applicant to just have their PE considered instead of all the other phases?
We have allowed that.
Okay. Even after the application?
I've been involved in projects where that's been allowed.
Yes, that has happened, Scott, but I'm open to any consideration through this process because we're writing this as we go, folks. Just bear in mind that there's some flexibility. It's limited and it's under the direction of the Federal Highway Administration. So we'll still have to be in compliance, and we trust Scott and Charles will give us good direction.
Well, the only reason I'm asking about this is because it has been done in the past. It's been done with projects I've been associated with in the past with Charles and previously with Gary. And it's an effective way for us to continue moving this project forward, also allowing us to complete our NEPA process before, or at least get our NEPA process underway before the next NOFA round, where we can apply for funding again for construction. It's just something that I want to throw out there as a possibility and something that makes sense and would be effective in moving our project forward, which based on the scoring, I think we can all collectively agree is an important project, because I don't think we should, forget about the scoring entirely. I understand legacy projects. I've been involved, obviously, in this process for a long time, and you significantly changed the way that legacy projects have been handled by going this route with including that in the score, as opposed to funding those over the top, right over the top over all other projects. I appreciate that to an extent, because it allows other projects to at least have a fighting chance. So I guess I'm just asking for that consideration. I don't know, Eric Wolverton, I don't have the number in front of me right now, but what our PE cost is for this project.
In the application, it was estimated to be a total of 1.2 million. So at a federal share, that would be $960,000.
I was just looking for the spot in the application where it's listed, and there's so many slots here that it's hard to find it. So it's 1.2 million
total, yes.
Okay.
And that is an estimate.
So if that would be a consideration, for the committee, we would appreciate that opportunity, because that would allow us to continue to move this project forward.
This is Mark Odell. Point of question then. On the application, the PE right away says only has $506,250. So where's the 1 million? I mean, I'm confused on what you're asking for. It says for PE right away, you may use federal aid up to, and it says $506,250. So Craig, are you asking for more than that?
There's a cap, Mark. There's a cap on PE and right away.
Yeah, I would be asking for whatever we could get in terms of PE and right away towards this project. That would at least get us in the hopper and the ability to be, considered in the future for additional funding.
I may?
Yes.
When I made the suggestion for the motion, this is exactly what I had in mind, getting St. John some money to keep their project moving forward. Getting them in line like we were 10 years ago and like Willow Creek was about 6 years ago, to move forward in this manner.
Thank you for your comments, Craig. We do have a motion and a second on the floor. I did just get a note over my screen from George Topple. He said he had to leave, but he would vote yes on that motion. So can we take a roll call on the motion?
Sure. Kyle Allen Sr., Jim Biggs, Jocelyn Denham, Andrew Kyers, Jeff Larson, Tom Schmidt.
Yes.
Thank you. Gerald Swets.
Yes.
And Scott, that's all I have for the STC commissioners.
Yeah, I apologize. The roster is kind of a revolving door with these topical committees.
Okay.
So we'll have to work on that for this coming year when we have our commission meeting the 21st. But I think, so I guess then that's the roll call.
Yes.
I have, Mr. Chairman, I just have a question here. So you're voting today for the SCC, but we're still going to take a vote on the land use committee regarding the expansion projects and the new roads projects. So, and then we will have a recommendation also going to the TPC. So I'm not sure about the vote yet, of the land use committee. However, I think we going to take both votes, and it's up to the TPC committee to decide on that. Is that right?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Kevin.
Scott, is that your understanding also, Scott?
Yeah, my understanding was that the land use committee would also have the opportunity to decide what their committee has decided and send a vote up to TPC as well. And then the TPC would, if it's consistent with this committee, then there wouldn't be any need to adjudicate. But if there was an inconsistency, that could be adjudicated at TPC, I guess. But yeah, absolutely, the land use committee was to take a look at these as well.
Land use committee going to meet before the TPC meeting?
I can't hear.
Question was, is the land use committee going to meet before the TPC?
They are going to meet this Thursday.
TPC is next week, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, but I think the recommendation will be taken and discussed in February, not this meeting.
More than likely.
Yeah.
Amen. Land use is this Thursday at 10:30, correct?
Yes.
And the February TPC meeting is where all these recommendations will be taken into account. And a draft list of projects will be decided upon.
Scott, do we have any more business?
Looking at the agenda, we do, other than to announce the next meeting, adjournment. So the next meeting is, for this committee, is scheduled for May 4th. And Mr. Chair, you can give any other business or.
Final comments from anyone? Our next meeting scheduled, unless we have to have a special meeting for some reason, our next meeting is scheduled for May 4th. Is that correct, Scott?
Yeah, because we're going to go back to quarterly unless as needed.
Okay.
And I'll say that I appreciate Tom having this meeting today for this further discussion. TPC will meet at 10 o'clock next Tuesday morning.
Okay, thank you, Ken. If there's no other comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Jerry Swift.
Mark Waddell, second.
We have a motion, we have a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Everyone have a wonderful day, the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.